Hello everyone, this is StrawberryShorty here with the Santa Claus's chapter, I believe it is 3? Chapter 3, Into the Wobbly Woods, which is another kind of weird title. Not as interesting as the previous two. Speaking of a previous video. First, we got copyright claimed again, which was frustrating. I suspect that is going to happen with all these videos. I hate this whole automatic flagging thing, it drives me nuts. Also had a real hard time making that video. I have to use this online video editing software, and first when I was saving or processing, the page accidentally reloaded, and then twice while I was either processing or saving, the computer froze and I lost everything. And since I'm piecing this together manually on this really frustrating program, and I was trying so hard to use really small snippets of the scenes in hopes that video wouldn't get flagged, so it was really annoying. But anyway, on with the episode. So Santa and Mrs. Claus are packing for the normal world, and Santa has a very concerning sweater that says "sit on my lap and tell me what you want," which apparently he's been wearing around the North Pole, which is a little bit concerning. He also finds his phone, which he apparently didn't keep on him. Wouldn't you want to be able to contact your son and your family back home? Do they have some other way of doing that? And Betty comes in to see how things are going along and notices that Noel is there being super depressed, and all I can think is that Betty can do better than him. I seriously think he loves Santa more than her. So it's a little concerning. And she talks about how they still need to find a replacement, which makes me think that the elf was acting alone, that crazy elf girl. And apparently that's not actually the case, but yeah. They kidnapped the candidates to interview them, all of them, and upon waking up, kind of similar to how Scott Calvin did in the first movie, Simon is freaking out while his daughter is excited. And I think Simon is having a pretty sane reaction here to suddenly waking up in some strange place. And I noticed that his pajamas have the SC initials, and it's is that his initials? Because I could not remember what the heck his last name is supposed to be. And the daughter is super excited. The pillows are edible. They are apparently marshmallow, which, look, I love marshmallows, but why would you want edible pillows? Why would you want to sleep on edible pillows? Why would you want them in your room? You're gonna get marshmallow on your hair, on your stuff. There's gonna be ants. I don't think that's a great idea. It's confused. Save that for gingerbread houses, you know? Simon accepts his situation almost immediately, that they are actually at the North Pole, and it's a bit weird. So we shift to Mrs. Claus and Sandra in Sandra's room, where an elf named Crouton, which is a very non-elf name, is freaking out because she put pictures all over the wall and apparently used thumbtacks, which, is a kind of fair complaint, but how did he not know this? I like seeing another high-strung elf. I think the high-strung elves are more funny than just the random children elves. But Mrs. Claus kind of starts to get sad at the idea of leaving because they raised their kids there. But, we saw no happy memories of the family being raised there. We were deprived of this, pretty much. And Sandra is unhappy because she apparently wants to stay at the North Pole, which makes no sense. Wasn't that the opposite? Didn't she want to leave and meet other kids? Buddy, meanwhile, he's super stoked because he wants to experience really random human world things that I guess is supposed to be funny, they later have him say he wants to visit the DMV and experience gridlock. But for someone who seems to have looked into the real world, you'd think he'd care about other things instead. I don't know, restaurants or something that makes more sense. Wouldn't he know these are bad things? But anyway. We suddenly see Simon and his daughter again. I'm just kind of wondering, it just kind of randomly occurred to me, how did they get in the pajamas? Who put them in the pajamas? That's a little weird to think about. They meet Mrs. Claus, who tells them they will have no memory of the experience, which is sad. But then she says that the child will have memory of it. So apparently She also stops Simon from taking photos, and apparently, yes, SC are his initials, but she stops him from taking photos because apparently you're not allowed to take photos at the North Pole. But, like, Santa was able to take a photo. He has a photo of his family. Like, would you just not take photos of anything? I'd be taking photos all the time because I like to take photos, especially if I'm up here with no access to, anything that people like to do. And it's still kind of weirding me out how he is, like how Simon is just so accepting of this. Like, as an adult, I feel like he should be way more skeptic. We shift to Santa interviewing one of the other candidates, who's apparently like a sports guy, and he's super stoked. I don't know why. I would imagine sports pays way better than being Santa Claus. I don't even know if being Santa Claus pays, let's be real. And Betty seems into him, but maybe she just wants a replacement. I do think the sports guy's a little funny, because he wants Santa to give him a note for his wife, since he got, like, spirited away while he was cleaning the gutters. But I think it's a bit rude that he signs Noel's shirt, like, autographs it without his consent. Like, don't sign people's shirts without their consent. Like, just give them a paper autograph. But, yeah. Santa tells Noel he does not want a fuss when it comes to his going-away party, which, of course, Noel is going to fuss. Noel has not stopped fussing since this show started, but especially since he learned that Santa is retiring, or even thinking about retiring. But there's all this talk about Simon maybe being Santa, and it's like he's the obvious frontrunner, right? Because we've seen him outside of this scene. But I'm just like, what about the girl? Like, what about the little girl? Like, isn't a big part of why they're returning the children who never got to experience normal growing up? And this guy doesn't have a wife, so the little girl is going to be, she's not going to have her dad around. He's going to be busy, like, all the time. So this just seems like why would someone with a child even be a candidate? Like, are we repeating the problem here? Like, none of the other Santas apparently had kids, so, yeah. I'm still continue to be confused by Buddy, who is watching the little girl while her dad goes to get interviewed, and is just asking her about all these really horrible things, again, for comedy. And the child is super sad that she won't remember, even though Mrs. Claus said 2 seconds ago she would. Betty asks Buddy just Buddy at this point, to watch the little girl, because she's totally self-aware that she will not be able to interact with a human child. So Buddy does, but then quickly ends up like losing her. But yeah, because Buddy pulls a lever and doll heads go all over the place. Although for a lever marked, don't pull this, I would expect a bigger problem, like alarms and whatnot. The elves are not rushing to clean up the mess, and Sandra and Grace wander off together. We get to see the interview between Simon and Santa. Santa offers him a strawberry Quick. Anyone remember Quick? I remember drinking Nesquik and cookies and cream Quick. Wasn't super crazy about it, but not bad. Nostalgic memory. And I'm just wondering why Santa wants to hire Simon at all. Like, why is Simon a candidate? Because wasn't his whole thing that he's bad at delivering stuff? Like, isn't that not a good thing for Santa? And Simon mentions that there's some gift about him making fun of his product never arriving, and I want to know if someone's made this gift. Like, does this exist? Can I find it on Tumblr? Santa says what I was thinking, like, why should I hire you? But, it's like, he was still a candidate. You brought this guy knowing this problem existed, and that he had a child. And Simon is still taking photos, which, Santa catches him, and they don't take his phone. I needed, a bunch of elves to, break in and just snatch his phone. This is what would have happened in the first movie. But, yeah. Buddy shows up right as Santa is basically dismissing Simon, to reveal that he has lost Grace, even though he didn't lose Grace. Grace left with Sandra, and he knows Grace left with Sandra. So, yeah. And Crazy Elf shows up again. Doesn't do much, though. We cut to Sandra and Grace checking out the... Oh, yeah, that's when the Crazy Elf shows up. She shows up while they're looking at the reindeer. And apparently, reindeer can fly because they believe they can fly. So that's a thing. A really great thing to tell an impressionable little girl. Let's hope she doesn't go jump off a roof because she believes she can fly. Like, oh, jeez. And again, Sandra is complaining about having to leave. But it's like, you hated it here last episode. You were, super upset that you were stuck in this place without other children. And now, well, she's, throwing a hissy fit because she doesn't want to leave. She also seems to hear an animal talk, which... We don't know what's going on here. So she wants to figure out why she heard an animal talk. She goes somewhere. Grace goes with her. Santa and Simon, trying to find out where the kids have gone, go to Elf's, the special tactics team from the original, which is now just one dude who has clearly seen some stuff. There's also a jail cell down there, but let's not ask about that. Anyway, he apparently noticed Grace and Sandra going into the Wobbly Woods, which is apparently super dangerous and has a witch in it, but did not tell anyone, even though he explicitly says it was dangerous. And I want to know more about this witch, because this has not gotten mentioned previously at all. It's nice that Simon cares about his daughter, though, like, even though it's freezing and everything, he goes out to this, insists on going out with Santa to this woods. They don't bring any protection, even though the woods are dangerous and there's a witch in there. It's just the two of them, and Santa's magic is not working. And, yeah. And they're like talking, having like a bonding moment. And Santa blames Simon for this, because you brought your kid with you. Everyone else left their kids. And it's like, why would he leave his kid? Like, why would anyone's instinct be to leave their kid behind? Also, like, wouldn't the kid be home alone with no idea what happened to their parent? Like, wouldn't she have run off to call the police or something? Like, I feel like this is something not really thought of, especially with a parent that is a single parent. And apparently Santa also did not know about the deceased wife, even though he is Santa Claus. That's kind of a big part of his thing. And Simon reveals that he actually stopped believing in stuff like Santa after the death of his wife 2 years prior, which you started believing real fast, I'm just saying. Forrest suddenly attacks them in a really lame way by freezing their legs a bit. I don't know why it does it now and not earlier. The witch shows up, and she has some kind of foreign name that apparently means witch. I can't remember what it is. The witch is disappointing. Like, her design is... There's nothing to it. Like, it's just a random outfit. Like, they could have made her look really interesting, and I'm sad that they didn't. Kind of hinted that she was like a version of Santa at one point, giving good kids stuff, riding around on a broom and all that. They really don't explain more, but she takes them back to her house where the kids are. And, like, apparently Sandra had come to ask her about being able to talk to animals, and I'm just like, you normally come here? Well, apparently she does. Because she's actually quite lonely, and the witch is one of her only friends, I guess. And again, it's like you're lonely, but you want to stay here rather than go where there will be children. And it comes out that she feels neglected, and Santa goes to talk with her. And she's like, what are you going to do? Like, you're going to ground me? Go ahead. Which, again, why do you want to stay? Like, you clearly seem to hate this place. You're giving me, like, really mixed messages here. And they sit down on the steps of the porch and are somehow not getting wet, even though it's covered in snow. And they talk about being scared. And, like, Sandra being scared, I get. Santa being scared seems a little weird. Like, I get that it's been a lot of time since he's been to the real world. But, I don't know. The neglect doesn't really get talked about. They just talk about how scared he was becoming Santa. And then suddenly we cut to Simon talking to Grace, revealing how Santa wants him to be the new Santa, but he said no, and then Santa asked him again, and Grace wants him to take the job. I'm just like, why are you lying? Santa didn't say that. Well, apparently Santa did say that, and it all happened off camera, because they cut to Santa and the family watching, and Simon agrees to become Santa, and we get no backstory, no further story for why the witch, why she's living in these woods, why everyone speaks ill of her, nothing. And so they're going to make Simon the new Claus, and they basically give him the coat. But it's like, does he know about any of the drawbacks? Like, did they tell him about the Mrs. Claus? Like, this is a dude who just lost his wife. Like, maybe he's not ready to get remarried. Did they tell him about that? Did they tell him about the difficulties of raising a child in the North Pole, about all the sacrifices that will have to be made, about the weight gain and all the white hair? And it seems unlikely because, at the very least, Mrs. Claus does comment, like, did you tell him about the Mrs. Claus? And it's like, no, I'll let him figure it out on his own, find out on his own, be a surprise. And it's like, that's not a fun surprise, especially for a widower. Crazy Elf prepares to blow some magic dust at them. Sandra was worried that they would forget, but apparently they won't because they're special. They hear Noel crying, and Santa's like, oh, I can't leave without saying bye to Noel, which apparently he was going to leave without saying bye to Noel. Like, what the heck? Noel starts dancing and singing, the Last Christmas, and it's really weird. And, yeah, and watching the touching display, Simon is talking about how he has big shoes to fill. And Betty is like, boots. You have big boots to fill, which boots are shoes, aren't they? Like, that's what I think. The elves that are dancing hold up a sign that says, "We love you, Satan," because they misspelled Santa. Surprisingly adult joke for this TV series. Cruton wants to hug Mrs. Claus. Like 3 other elves come to hug Mrs. Claus. And it's semi-touching, except for the fact that nobody expressed any care for this. Like, we did not see any touching scenes with Crouton and Santa. Like, we've at least seen Newell and Betty interacting with Mr. and Mrs. Claus. We haven't seen any of these elves really interact with her in any kind of positive way. And then it's just the 3 of them rather than, like, have a big line, so the scene does not really work. That girl causes problems again, the crazy girl, because she starts clapping her hands with the music and triggers the angel dust. Somehow just on... they call it angel dust. Questionable name. But it just triggers on those 4 instead of everyone that was nearby. They wake up in, I don't know, Chicago, someplace. They're in the pajamas again, and Sandra comes into the room and freaks out when she sees her dad's new look. It reminds me of those videos of the dads who shave and their babies start crying. And, like, I thought the weather here was supposed to be warm, but the kids run outside to play. And I'm just like, wouldn't this kind of weather be hard for them, having grown up in the North Pole? But apparently not. They're having a great time. But at the Elf Pole, we see lights flickering, and that orb thing is getting darker, so things are getting worse there for some reason. We have no idea. I'm still wondering where this is going to go. Like, what's the problem that's happening, and who's going to be the new Santa Claus? Because it could go any way. Like, is Simon really going to stay Santa? What about current Santa? Well, not current Santa anymore, but you know who I mean. I'm still kind of leaning towards Sandra after this whole animal talking experience. But, well, I guess we'll see. Bernard still hasn't shown up. Maybe he'll show up next episode, because it seems like that's when things are going to start going down. But anyway, I got to get started making this video, because we're going to have a copyright claim, so. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment. Let me know your theories, your thoughts on the episode, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!